Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, November 28th, 2018. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, professor from the Harvard School of Government, Stephen Walt. On the hell of good intentions, Americans' foreign policy elite and the decline of U.S. primacy. Meanwhile, revealed yesterday, it turns out, in fact, Manafort's lawyers were briefing Trump's lawyers even after having made a plea deal. Also on the did they or didn't they front, Jerome Corsi pretends he thought up the whole idea of WikiLeaks, passing on emails. And a vote today in the Senate to end our Yemen assault. Meanwhile, Chuck Schumer does it again, folks. This time offers Trump part of his wall in return for nothing. Meanwhile, U.S. creating a border crisis by stalling on asylum applications at the border, and Cory Booker to propose baby bonds. Meanwhile, last night in Mississippi, racist wins, but not as big as she should have. Meanwhile, North Carolina, a racist may not get on the federal judiciary after all. Speaking of North Carolina, it could be 41, folks. It still could be 41. We thought the midterms were over, but the 9th congressional district in North Carolina, where the Republican won by 900 votes, refused to certify the election because of some shenanigans. Unnamed shenanigans. All this and more on today's program, ladies and gentlemen. Forgive me for one moment because I really need to blow my nose. Excuse me.
That's very triggering. A guy does snot rocket right onto my bag today on my way to work. So.
Wow, I'm sorry about that.
When did you do that?
That was not.
I didn't know that you guys had the same route.
No, I was. I didn't mean to. That was an accident. But
you
in this
go
instance,
snot rocket. All right, see you there. I need the packet ready.
Folks, before we get to today, is a big day in my life. Before we get to that, let me remind you that you spend a third of your life in your sheets. And it's about time for a bedding upgrade. Literally, let me just tell you this. As I was reading this, my first reaction was, God damn it, because I just bought a set of pillows. And I didn't realize we were going to get a $20 off promotion. I had no idea. What am I talking about? I'm talking about Brooklinen. They were founded in early 2014. They are the fastest growing bedding brand in the world with over 30,000 five-star reviews, 500,000 happy sleepers and counting. Their mission is to make the five-star hotel quality sheets that are affordable and easy to order. And since they believe that sheets should look great in addition to feeling great, they offer over 20 colors and patterns that you can mix and match. I have multiple sets of Brooklinen sheets, pillowcases, and I just went in for the pillows, and I may actually go now with this deal. I may go in with some king size pillowcases as well. Why not? Why not have it all match? That would be new for me. But I've spoken about Brooklyn a lot. They give you a couple of different styles of cotton sheets. If you want to be like me, you go with the classic, cool, crisp cotton ones. But they have the more silky types. That's just not what I go for. I like it rough. Anyways, folks, my Brooklyn sheets are the best, most comfortable sheets I've ever slept on. And now it's time for your upgrade. Brooklinen.com is giving an exclusive offer just for my listeners. Get $20 off and free shipping. I've got to get those pillows now. When you use promo code majority at brooklinen.com. Brooklinen is so confident in their product that all their sheets, comforters, and towels come with a lifetime warranty. The only way to get $20 off and free shipping is to use the promo code majority at brooklinen.com. That's Brooklinen, BROOKLINEN.com, promo code majority. Brooklinen, these really are the best sheets ever. I'm telling you. Believe me. Okay, folks. Like I say, today is a very special day for me. It is the anniversary of the day Mike Cernovich provided for me one of the more enjoyable experiences I had in an extended period of time, and at the same time, essentially took a hammer and smashed his own fingers. That's a metaphor, of course. He didn't really do that, although he may have, for all I know. So let's go back a year to the day. Sometime before November 28th, 2017, we had looked at this video of Mike Cernovich in basically a live audition on InfoWars. This was a show many of you probably don't remember. There was this guy, Alex Jones, and he used to have a big show that people apparently, I don't know if they watch anymore, but when was the last time you heard Alex Jones' name? Talk about the value of deplatforming. Yep. But anyways, here was Alex Jones, and Mike Cernovich was in a big opportunity for him, looking for legit work, and, well, he didn't do so well.
This is an executive order outside of law, just legalizing everybody. But then that was ignored what he really said. But think about the takeaway of this with this mayor, where you can say, okay, and also not welcome law and order, also not welcome safe society, also not welcome a property tax base that isn't being eroded. I mean, these Democrat-run cities are sinking into the mud, and here is Rahm Emanuel demonizing the president, trying to save the economy.
Right, because he has no answers. He has no answer for the violence. He has no leadership. While how many people are shot every weekend in Chicago? 30 to 50 people. Some weekends are shot. Record numbers of murders in Chicago.
All right, pause it for 1 second. I want to go back just to just take it to just seconds before Alex Jones tees up the audio from Rahm Emanuel, and instead, here's Mike Cernovich, and you can see the anger on Jones.
To the mud, and here is Rahm Emanuel demonizing the president, trying to save the economy.
Right, because he has no answers. He has no answer for the violence. He has no leadership. While how many people are shot every weekend in Chicago? 30 to 50 people. Some weekends are shot. Record numbers of murders in Chicago. And rather than deal with those real problems, he virtue signals, which is all. This is why Hillary lost. This is why the Democrats keep losing.
By the way, do we not have that clip? Because there's a press conference. Oh, it's ready. Okay, well, let's go ahead and play that clip.
Thank you for shut up now. Shut up.
It's ready.
Shut up.
Oh, okay.
Shut up. Now, obviously, a lot of people would just slough it off and they'd say, okay, maybe I'm not cut out for this, or, Alex Jones got his thing, I'm going to start my own thing, or whatever it is. But this must have really, really hurt Mike Cernovich. Cernovich. I can't. Because when we watched it and laughed, I mean, it was very, 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 very funny.
We maybe did overkill.
We maybe
laughed and we laughed and we.
I mean, we laughed for days, and
it's still funny,
right?
Yeah.
And
it's
so
amazing how well it holds
this
up,
got
actually.
Mike Cernovich very upset, And what he did, and maybe, do we have the original tweet that he, what he did was he paid, I think it was Jack Prozobiak, the guy who ended up getting caught on Bumble cheating on his pregnant wife. And then ostensibly said it was some type of
There's an FBI investigation, Sam. That's
I don't want to say anymore because there's still an
FBI
investigation that's been going on for months. The FBI very slow on this one. But he dug through my tweets, and 9 years ago, he found a tweet that I did in response to an attempt by people in the entertainment business. 100 directors or filmmakers had signed a petition saying we want Roman Polanski to be allowed back into the country to get some type of lifetime achievement award because he, of course, had left on the eve of a sentencing with a plea deal for statutory rape decades ago. And I found that to be pretty offensive. The idea that you would excuse a fugitive who had been convicted of statutory rape because he's a good filmmaker. And so I fashioned a tweet. You can decide for yourself if you think it's legitimate satire, but I did. I wrote, "Don't care, Polanski, but I hope if my daughter is ever raped, it's by an older, truly talented man with a great sense of mise en scène." Mise en scène, of course, is basically just like a sense of scene, an ability to shoot a good cinematic image. And so that was the joke. And then Mike Cernovich, but he tweets out, he goes, "I just published MSNBC contributor Sam Seder endorses Polanski's sex crimes in now deleted tweet." And that was a Medium post that he had done. And so what happens is on this day, November 28th, 2017, I take I rush home. It was before I was aware of this, and I get off the subway, and I was rushing because it was my birthday, and I was going to the local Key Food to get some paper plates because I had a bunch of friends coming over, like 3 people, and we were having Chinese food to celebrate my birthday, and so I'm in the supermarket, and I get a call from MSNBC, and I think, I can't go on Hayes tonight. It's my birthday, and but it turns out to be some other guy and he's like, "Do you know who Mike Cernovich is?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I do." And he goes, "Oh no, wait, I should go back." As I get off the subway, I check Twitter, because this is when I pull stories whenever I can, and I noticed that somebody had retweeted this tweet of mine from 9 years ago. And I thought that was weird. It was the Polanski one. And I looked at it, and it was like some guy who had just like 3 followers and followed like 300 people. And I thought it was some type of bot or something. So I went in and I just deleted the tweet. I didn't have time to look at it. I was rushing to the supermarket. And when I get into the supermarket, I get a call. "Do you know who Mike Cernovich is?" And I'm like, "Yeah. I make fun of him on a regular basis." And the guy said, "Well, are you aware of a tweet that you made about Roman Polanski?" And I'm like, "I just saw that. Someone retweeted it." And he goes, "Yes, well, Cernovich retweeted and this and that, and that's basically started the whole thing." And so he said, and I explained it to him. I said, "This is what it was." And he said, "Let me know." And then over the course of the next week, things developed at MSNBC. And by Sunday, 4 or 5 days later, MSNBC basically spoke to a press person and said that I had been fired. I think there's some question as to whether they were trying to fire me or just let me fade away, but it all came to a head. And then Mike Cernovich was very, very happy. This is what he said.
And we're back. Mike Cernovich, Cernovich.com. Big breaking news. Sam Seder, who is MSNBC contributor, he is no longer an MSNBC News contributor after a tweet of him making a joke about child rape and Roman Polanski was reported by Mike Cernovich and was made publicly available. Thank you to everybody who emailed MSNBC. Thank you to all of you, your heroes. you're heroes because you emailed MSNBC and you let them know about the tweet. You let them know the people will be heard. We are the media now. We are the media now. And if you endorse, or you can call it satire, Sam goes, it's satire, whatever, MSNBC ain't laughing. Who's laughing now, Sam?
Everyone in this office is, I think the rest of the story is well known. After a couple of days, MSNBC reversed their decision. Mike Cernovich became very depressed and desperate. He attempted to dig himself out of a hole by getting Chuck Schumer, by smearing Chuck Schumer. And it turns out that he got sort of rat-effed and used documents that were fake. And then we haven't heard much of Mike Cernovich. The gorilla has gone back into the cave and has been hibernating. So to answer this question, what was the question again, Matt? Could you play that?
Who's laughing now, Sam? 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 Who's laughing
Is this your new ringtone?
Who's laughing now, Sam?
I encourage people, go back and use that as a ringtone. And so
not only laughing, but also growing significantly
exactly.
as a show.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's been great. It was really the whole experience. I was just explaining to Brendan. It was fun for me in a lot of different ways. I felt very confident that I had not done anything wrong. I didn't know that it would turn out so well at the beginning of it. But I enjoyed every moment of it, both professionally and personally. We introduced the Mike Cernovich Can Kiss My Ass membership, which people love, and which you can find at jointhemajorityreport.com. Just head there. So I want to wish myself a happy birthday / Mike Cernovich Day, as we call it around my house.
It's still in the background.
Who's laughing now, Sam? Who's laughing now, Sam?
All right, so.
And whenever I'm afraid that I suck at my job and everybody hates me, I'm just going to watch that clip of him on Alex Jones again.
It's so great. All right,
the
folks.
most inconvenient part of that clip was having to explain to so many normal people who these people are just so they could enjoy that clip.
Exactly.
I, relentlessly played it for
people that
anybody
you
that
really
was within
don't wouldn't like if you had any
right.
idea of what they put into the world. You wouldn't like them at all. All right, folks, going to take a quick break. When we come back, Stephen Walt, author of The Hell of Good Intentions, Americans' Foreign Policy Elite and the Decline of U.S. Primacy. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. It's a pleasure to welcome to the program Stephen Walt, author of The Hell of Good Intentions, Americans' Foreign Policy Elite and the Decline of U.S. Primacy. He is also the Robert and Renee Belfer Professor of International Affairs at Harvard. Stephen, welcome to the program.
It's nice to be talking with you.
Okay, so the book basically covers more or less the last 25 years. I guess almost exactly the last 25 years, from the fall of the Soviet, or shortly after the fall of the wall and the fall of the Soviet Union, the end of the Cold War. But before we get there, just give me your assessment of broad strokes, U.S. foreign policy following World War II, just so that we have a context in which to view these last 25 years.
I would argue that the U.S. foreign policy post-World War II was mostly successful in terms of its fundamental objectives. The primary focus was, the containment of the Soviet Union and the promotion of what some now call a liberal world order, at least in parts of the world, and that set of goals was achieved, fortunately, without blowing up the world or without having a major great power war. It was not a perfect record by any means. The United States made a number of pretty significant blunders, of which I think the Vietnam War is probably the most obvious example. But in terms of its sort of core objectives of both defeating the Soviet Union, preserving American independence, fostering global prosperity, we were largely successful.
And just also to tease this out in terms of like what sort of the fundamental assumptions are, when we assess foreign policy, is it exclusively from the perspective of what the agenda is of when we're talking about the United States, of the United States? I mean, in other words, I'm just trying to tease out, sort of, I guess the notion of foreign policy realism versus other, fundamental assumptions that define other perspective on foreign policy. Because, some people would say, we did a great job in terms of containing the Soviet Union, but maybe not so well in fostering democracy in Central America, Latin America.
Right. As I said, it was not a perfect record, and there were times where I think the United States erred in a variety of different ways. I think we exaggerated the danger that communism posed in certain contexts, so we were in some places, and Central America is a good example, I think, sort of behind the curve in promoting, democracy or human rights and things like that. I tend to think of it in sort of three categories. Foreign policy is about trying to make the American people more secure against various foreign dangers, trying to encourage American prosperity so the American people can live more, bountiful and secure lives at home, and finally promoting a set of values that we care about, the sort of traditional values of democracy, human rights, relatively open markets, rule of law, things like that. Those are the three basic objectives, and there are sometimes trade-offs between them. But when we try to evaluate foreign policy, we sort of ask, are the American people safer? Are they more prosperous? Or are their values being accepted more widely around the world? And that's the criteria I tend to judge a foreign policy against.
Okay, great. All right, so we have a sort of a baseline as to what is the watershed, as it were, as to what we're assessing these things. So in 1993, we're talking at the fall of the Soviet Union. Talk about the idea of liberal hegemony. I mean, what is this notion at that time, or I should maybe let's put it this way: what are the various competing foreign policy ideologies or perspectives that emerge from the Cold or the post-Cold War, the beginning of the post-Cold War era?
Well, what's interesting is there was hardly any debate after the Cold War ended. The Soviet Union had disappeared. This is a fundamental change in world politics. The United States is now the unipolar power, really unchallenged by everyone. And the 90s are a period of great optimism. We're now heading into a world where people think liberal democracy is going to spread easily, as indeed it is in Eastern Europe and in Latin America. We think peace is Middle East through the Oslo process. Iraq has been disarmed. Iran has no nuclear enrichment. Globalization is beginning to spread. Russia is adopting a market economy. And so there's this great sense that, the wind is at America's back. and everything's going to go smoothly. And if you look at what's going on today, it's clear that those hopes were all disappointed. Our relations with Russia are worse than at any time since the Cold War. Democracy is now in retreat. It has been for over a decade now. Even the United States was downgraded by The Economist magazine from a full to a flawed democracy last year. The Middle East has not become more peaceful. If anything, the Middle East is more divided. And, oh, by the way, we have fought several wars, and most of them didn't turn out particularly well at great cost to the United States, which is why I think, again, you would judge this record as being one of far more failures than successes. And I argue in the book that it's largely because we adopted a very ambitious strategy of trying to essentially transform the world in our image.
What were was there any variance there in terms of that? I mean, because I guess because of ultimately where we ended up in terms of Iraq, had keyed into the ideas that came out of the out of PNAC, right? This notion of the United States being a hyperpower, and was there any? All of those ideas, maybe you can characterize those ideas. And was there no divergence theoretically between, the neocons and anybody else?
Actually, much less divergence than people often think. Again, it's not that there are no differences between, say, Clinton and Bush or Bush and Obama, but the continuities are at least as important as the differences. All three presidents actively supported the idea of using American power to transform other societies. Obama and Clinton, I think, did it more gently, more discreetly than Bush did with the invasion of Iraq. But the United States was formally committed to spreading democracy and using military force to do that, if necessary. That's certainly the way that Obama responded in Libya. That's certainly what he did when he sent more troops to Afghanistan in 2009. And that has been a consensus view across both political parties. The mainstream Democratic foreign policy has been one of, again, sort of promoting liberal values, using American power, bringing more and more countries into American alliances. And that was also true of the sort of neocons in the Cheney era who got us into Iraq. There are some differences. I think, the Democrats were more favorably disposed towards international institutions like the United Nations and others than the neocons were. But in terms of seeing the United States as the indispensable power that had to push to shape local politics in just about every corner of the world, whether by expanding NATO endlessly eastward or by intervening in other countries, it was still pushing an agenda that eventually pushed back at us in various ways.
Why? Okay, before we get into sort of the intentions, and maybe that's where there is maybe some, maybe there's a little bit more disparity there, maybe there's not. But what ultimately, I think people have a sense of why it failed because that it comes down to even basic human relations. Sometimes you can't make other people do what you want them to.
Well, that's right. there are certainly limits to U.S. power, but again, this was an ambitious and revisionist agenda, and I would just remind everybody that Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton and a number of other prominent members of the Obama administration voted to support the Iraq War. They were not skeptical of that particular adventure as well. So, again, this was pretty much a bipartisan consensus. I think why it failed is multiple reasons. First of all, it threatened non-democracies, including countries like China and Russia. We may have had the best of intentions, but if you say that our goal is to spread democracy around the world, non-democracies are going to see that as threatening, and some of them are going to be in a position to do things to thwart us. Second, we turned out to be pretty good at regime change. We could get rid of weak foreign governments, but we had no idea what to do with those societies after we broke them. of, unfortunately, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, to some degree Syria, certainly Yemen as well. And this was, I think, delusional to think that we could create democracies in places that were very unpromising, and certainly to believe that we could do it quickly made no sense at all. Finally, globalization was, of course, all part of this. We were going to expand global markets, and I think that's a good thing. I'm in favor of free trade, but it did not deliver the benefits that were promised. Those benefits were not distributed widely with our society. So, the Asian middle class did very well. Asian lower classes did well. The 1% here in the United States did pretty well. But the lower and middle classes in the United States and also in Western Europe did not really benefit from this. And that's part of the backlash, I think, that you're seeing now with populism in Europe and here in the United States.
And so the goal of spreading democracy, which I guess would align with, on some level, I mean, theoretical, right? We're looking at the sort of, we're trying to take a non-jaundiced eye towards this, but to the idea of promoting a set of values, I mean, just fundamentally having that goal, which you mentioned as the third sort of tenet, I guess, of how you would assess U.S. foreign policy, that goal in and of itself was problematic, or was it really just more the tactics used to follow that strategy?
Well, certainly it's the tactics. I think liberal values are excellent values, and I'm really thrilled to live in a society where they are still reasonably well established. Some questions about how much they may be at risk today here, even in the United States. But I'm glad that I live in a society where freedom of speech is protected, and there is a functioning legal system, and we have representative government. But it turns out it's not a great export commodity. The process of building democracies, even in the West, took centuries and was very contentious. And it's very difficult for outsiders to come into societies that they don't know particularly well, that have their own deep divisions, where any form of regime creates winners and losers, and the losers are going to be resentful and may resist violently. The idea that we could do that kind of social engineering quickly, again, I think was fanciful. So it is largely the tactics. We should, of course, adhere to those values and respect those values, and I think the best way to spread them abroad is mostly to create a society here in the United States that is so impressive and so admirable that others will see it and want something like that. So we can stick to our values, but the best way to spread them is by setting a good example here at home.
All right, and I want to circle back to that and maybe expand on that question. But let's move to the what you call the blob. This is the foreign policy community. I know maybe on some level, it is now conflated, or maybe properly or improperly, with the deep state on some level. But there is clearly a foreign policy establishment. Tell us, characterize them for us.
Yeah. Well, these are people who devote their careers to working on matters of foreign affairs, and so you could include me as, I guess, probably a dissident member of this. By the way, just for the record, the term "the blob" was coined by Ben Rhodes, who was Barack Obama's deputy national security advisor and speechwriter, and he used it to refer to essentially the Washington, Beltway establishment on foreign policy. So I'd include, the institutions of government, state, defense, intelligence agencies, in Washington who work on foreign affairs, lobbying groups of all kinds, whether it's human rights or arms control or defense spending or whatever, that lobby on foreign affairs issues. Those people in the media who cover foreign affairs, so they're part of this community as well. And, of course, people like me in academia who also study these issues. And the thing I'd say about it is twofold. One is it is a community, particularly at the higher levels. People know each other. They've worked in various capacities or for different organizations. And success in that world depends almost entirely on one's reputation. There's no formal degree you have to have, no license you have to pass, no bar exam to practice foreign policy. You just have to be respected by others in the field who will point you to key positions or listen to what you have to say. And that creates a very powerful incentive for conformity. You don't want to do or say anything that makes you look suspect or suggests that your judgment isn't sound or whatever. So one of the central themes of the book is that there's been remarkable conformity across Democratic and Republican elites here, and surprisingly little change in what the foreign policy elite wants to do, despite the fact that for the past 25 years, many of their major projects have gone very badly. And it really wasn't until Donald Trump showed up that you had someone openly and aggressively challenging that elite. I say that, by the way, as someone who thinks Trump has only made things worse, but that 2016, when he ran for president, one of his targets was this elite, and he said, U.S. He was probably more right than wrong.
I would agree with at least with that assessment. It was sort of fun to watch him criticize Jeb Bush for his brother's work in Iraq. So. I mean, how does this the continuity through the years? It's simply just. I mean, I guess it's blob nature, and this dynamic is not. I mean, we find this dynamic in nature, right? I mean, we find. In nature and in academia and in other. This idea of look around and see what others are saying and sort of like a slightly conform to that. What. I think your assessment of the blob is that they are well intentioned, but and not necessarily as I guess the reasons why they pursue this strategy is a well intentioned, I guess, temerity as opposed to maybe or is it possible there are people like Dick Cheney who are like, well, I slightly define U.S. interests in a slightly different way, right? So I mean, just break that down for me.
Yeah. I don't think everyone in the foreign policy elite is a saint, right? But I do think I tend not to believe the sort of worst conspiracy theories that the United States has some really nefarious objectives in all of these things. I think the vast majority of people in the foreign policy establishment believe in what they're doing. They believe that for the United States to be the world leader, the dominant world power, to be spreading its values actively in other places, to be pulling more countries into U.S.-led alliances, which then creates an obligation for the United States to protect those countries, is a good thing to do. So I think that their intentions are, for the most part, benevolent. The problem is that the results have not been the ones that they've promised, have not been the ones that they claim to produce. So if one of these goals was to spread a set of liberal values, and by liberal I don't mean left wing, I mean sort of classic principles of liberalism, of rule of law, representative government, freedom of speech, things like that. Spreading those around the world they believed was going to be a good thing, but if that was what they were going to bring us, that's not what we're getting. We're actually getting a world where freedom is declining as measured by Freedom House, where the number of democracies is shrinking, and where some democracies like Hungary or Poland are sort of veering back in an illiberal direction. And we even have some concerns here in the United States about the robustness of the set of values we've all come to revere. So again, their intentions, I think, were positive, but the results were disappointing.
And why is there no accountability? I mean, it doesn't. I mean, like I know that you were instrumental in, or at least at the very least, involved in placing that big ad in the run-up to the Iraq War. To the extent that I became more politically active, it was in those months leading up to the Iraq War, and the information was there. I distinctly remember, telling my dad, this is not going to be as easy as they say it is. That's just on page 1. But if you read page 14 of the paper, they start telling you this is going to cost, maybe a couple of $1 trillion, that this is going to be intractable, that there is no weapons of mass destruction. I mean, the information was there for someone who was, slightly less casual than a completely casual bystander. And yet all of these people who sold the war to us, it seems to me, suffered less than no consequences.
Yeah, I think this has been a big problem, and it's not unique to the foreign policy community. Right. It's true of lots of other organizations. It's hard to hold people accountable. I mean, just to take another example, look at the scandals in the Catholic Church, where people were constantly forgiven for really heinous actions as well, and you could multiply other examples too. But certainly the experience of the last 25 years is exactly what you suggest. It's a record time and time again of people not being held responsible. Look at the 9/11 Commission report, which did an interesting job of dissecting what happened, but didn't hold anyone personally accountable. No one actually made a mistake. No one is named in that report as having done something wrong. You consider most of the architects of the Iraq War have retained positions of respect and responsibility throughout. And to figure just the most obvious example, the current U.S. National Security Advisor, John Bolton, was an open advocate of the Iraq War and defended it for years after as having been the correct response. You would think if we held people accountable for bad judgment, he would be a marginal figure who we kind of regarded with a certain amount of disdain. But instead, he has served in multiple administrations, serving in a very influential position in this one as well. And I could multiply more examples. What's even more greater concern is that some of the people who have gone public with reservations, I talk about several examples in the book, end up being marginal figures, right? As soon as you go outside the consensus, the likelihood that you'll get ignored or not get advanced goes up. And that's, I think, unfortunate if you want to try and learn from experience, reward the people who have been right in the past, and pay maybe less attention to the people who have been consistently wrong.
How do we, I mean, you talk about how not to fix U.S. foreign policy, but just zeroing in for a moment, and I want to get to that, but zeroing in on that notion of accountability, how do we fix that? I mean, because that to me seems to be a universal problem. I mean, you mentioned like the Catholic Church, no one's held accountable, or not nearly enough, but that's theoretically a lot less a democratic institution than the U.S. government. And but I guess the foreign policy. But this is also the case. I mean, frankly, it's the same thing with pundits, right? Like, with all due respect, I get on the TV and I sometimes have to, be in the same building as Bill Kristol, who it seems to me couldn't have been any more wrong. I had the opportunity to sit across Tom Friedman and say, suck on this to him on TV. And that was one of the greatest moments of my life, but he still is considered to have a notion of what he's talking about. And I mean, what do we deal with the accountability issue rather than just simply saying, hey, people should be more accountable?
Well, I wish I had a magic button solution to this one, but there really isn't one. I think the only thing one can do is try to publicize these things and make them hold people publicly accountable by raising the issue, by not just going along and saying, well, he or she is a respected member of the elite, they've got lots of experience, I will treat them with great deference and respect. I may be willing to do that, but only if their record justifies it. So it does involve, the willingness to sort of confront what people's actual record looks like. This is a tricky problem, however, because, of course, foreign policy is difficult and challenging, and nobody gets everything right. None of us are infallible, and any public official is going to make some mistakes, particularly if they're in positions of responsibility. Then I think the thing we have to look for is, are people willing to acknowledge mistakes and acknowledge that they've learned from them, or do they keep defending things that clearly did not turn out well and don't appear to be learning at all and appear to be continually recommending the same sort of policies that have failed over and over and over again. So you wouldn't rehire a baseball team's manager if they presided over 10 losing seasons and insisted everything was fine. You'd fire them and get somebody else to do it. It seems to me if there's a consistent record of failure and a sort of stubborn unwillingness to learn from one's past mistakes, then we ought to be looking for other people to do the jobs.
I agree. Sadly, we don't have an owner, right? I mean, that's the dilemma. But let me just transition into what we should be doing, because I wonder, the structure of the way that we have been approaching foreign policy, is that something that we need to change to minimize the damage that being wrong can do?
Yeah, I think that sort of the long term, there are some forces at work in the world today that I think are going to shift the United States to a somewhat less interventionist posture. I think we're going to find ourselves more focused on China, which is going to leave less opportunity to go get into trouble in other parts of the world. I think there are pressing demands we have here at home. I think adapting to climate change is going to be very expensive, and that's going to put limits on the projects we get involved in distant areas. But I think you're also going to have to see the emergence of what you might call a new foreign policy elite, or at least a more diverse, intellectually diverse foreign policy elite. For the past 25 years, as I've suggested, we had a pretty uniform mindset. Not 100% agreement on every single issue, but a very powerful consensus in favor of ambitious American global leadership. And I think if we get a broader community of people debating these issues, more people within it who have a skeptical view of some of these projects, we're going to end up with more intelligent policies, and we're going to be less likely to make real missteps. Building that more diverse community is going to take a while. I think millennials have a different attitude. Some of them are moving into the political scene now. The composition of Congress is changing in some interesting ways as well, but it's not going to be something that changes overnight.
And so, and you advocate an outsourcing of sorts. Explain that.
Well, I believe that at least one part of outsourcing is that the United States should be devolving responsibility in some parts of the world to other countries, particularly in Europe, where the United States really does not need to play a large security role there any longer. Russia is not the Soviet Union. The Russian economy is now smaller, measured in terms of GNP, than that of Italy. Right? It's not going to take over Europe. Europe, in fact, spends more on defense every year, Europe combined, than Russia does. So the United States doesn't need to do very much there. We shouldn't be doing very much in the Middle East either, because almost everything we do there makes things worse. And we should be focusing most of our attention on Asia, where there is a rising power that may be challenging U.S. interests in a variety of ways.
And so does that involve cutting our military budget? How does that work? Is there how do we actually make that happen?
Well, I think it's partly by building a more diverse national security and foreign policy community that doesn't just subscribe to the prevailing sort of mainstream consensus, and creating new think tanks, new organizations that can work in Washington to shape congressional opinion, and can also be available to fill key positions in administrations that are going to be elected down the road. Again, this is something of a generational challenge, and one of the reasons I wrote my book was to try and accelerate that process. So instead of taking 30 years, maybe it only takes 20. You also could see some interesting coalitions emerging politically. There is, I think, on foreign policy, a potential coalition between what I would call real progressives and realists like me, and also some libertarians. These three groups don't agree on everything, and there's lots of disagreements on aspects of domestic policy within those different groups. But on foreign policy, they all tend to favor a rather non-interventionist approach, and that
we're seeing that today in the Senate, right? We're seeing that today on this vote on Yemen.
That's exactly right. And it took a while to reach a rather obvious conclusion, because the Senate does not always move with great swiftness. But I think that that is exactly the sort of thing you may see more of in the future.
All right. Lastly, let me just ask you about intervention. I've read where you've expressed that you think that it is appropriate for U.S. intervention in to stop a potential genocide. So how do you make that assessment? I mean, in my mind, that is why I was supportive, at least, of what the initial UN mandate was in Libya. Because theoretically, that is what it was supposedly about. And how do we make that assessment if we don't outsource that assessment to some type of theoretically third party?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I certainly don't rule out the use of American power to prevent a genocide, but I set a fairly high bar for such actions. First of all, one has to be really confident that that's what one's really facing. And there is a debate even now about just how serious Gaddafi's threat to the citizens of Benghazi was. There were some concerns that there was going to be a bloodbath. There was no certainty that that is the case. But the more certain you are that there's really going to be a mass killing or loss of life, obviously the greater the incentive to try and do something to prevent it. So one, you have to be really convinced something horrible is about to happen. Second, you have to be convinced that you do have the means to prevent it. And at an acceptable cost to the American people. One hates to be sort of so cost-benefit related, but that's, I think, relevant. And then finally, and very importantly, you also have to believe that you're not going to make things worse. And, for example, there is a legitimate debate to be had on U.S. policy towards Syria, where an awful humanitarian tragedy has taken place. But it seems to me the judgment of the Obama administration, and especially President Obama, was that for the United States to get more actively involved, or in particular to go in and try and take down the Assad regime, was actually going to make things worse. Was going to create a failed state and ultimately possibly opportunities for extremist groups to gain power there as well. Now, he may have been wrong, but it seems to me that's the way you have to think about it. Is there a real danger? Is there something we can do about it at an acceptable cost? And are we confident that we're not going to make things worse?
I guess the question is, how do you get, I mean, that's, how do you get those in? Those are tough questions.
Yeah, these are judgment. Well, they are judgment calls, and reasonable people are sometimes going to disagree about how to answer them. But those are the questions you have to ask, it seems to me, as opposed to sort of reflexively saying, oh, well, something bad is happening someplace. It's our responsibility to go stop it. And you just also want to be aware that there is a slippery slope here, that the more you welcome moral crusades of this kind, the more likely you are to suddenly discover you're back in the business of trying to govern countries that you really don't understand very well.
Stephen Walt, the book is The Hell of Good Intentions, Americans' Foreign Policy Elite and the Decline of U.S. Primacy. Thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
It was really great talking with you, too.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
All right, folks. Oh, everybody's got a cold around here. We're going to take a quick break, head into the fun half of the program. He had to go teach class. Could have kept him on for another 20 minutes, I think. But gotta get to class. Students are waiting. Just a reminder, this program relies on you, our listeners, for 98% of its revenue. 96.5. I don't know what the latest numbers are. You can support this program and tell Mike Cernovich, again, to kiss his ass, or kiss your ass. Kiss his own ass. Kiss any ass he wants to. By heading over to jointhemajorityreport.com. I want to thank all of you who have become members, and I want to thank Mike Cernovich for the fun that the last year. I think it's I think every year on the 28th I'm going to celebrate because of Mike Cernovich.
Becoming dilated now, where our time is becoming dilated now, where I always ask people, how long ago was it when Kathy Griffin pulled her little ISIS beheading stunt? How long ago was Scaramucci fired? everything is happening.
Seems like
now.
1,000 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. So our time is becoming dilated because we're approaching the singularity. Whatever that means, we don't know yet because we've never been in the singularity.
Hold on, wait a second. Go back. I never noticed when Alex Jones, when, like he was with him with the dilated, but then when he got to the singularity, Alex Jones did that same thing where he looks up, like his eyes just roll back into his head. Watch this.
Everything is happening.
Seems like 1,000 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. So our time is becoming dilated because we're approaching the singularity. Whatever that means, we don't know yet because we've never been in the singularity. But our time now is being accelerated, right? Where a second feels
whatever
like
that means,
a minute, right? We live so much in a day now. A full day now feels like a month, and a month feels like a year, and a year feels like a decade. I mean, think about it. We hadn't even met. Feels like I knew you 10 years, 20 years. We met for the first time a few months ago?
Agree.
It's crazy, right? So
this guy's crazy. Feels like it's been a long time. Every second.
I have to say, honestly,
eternity.
Time undilated for me. Mike Cernovich, I feel like this. It was just 3 weeks ago that you were providing for me one of the more dynamic, dramatic, exciting weeks that I have had in a long time. It used to be, my life used to be a lot more dynamic, but then you get kids, settle down, you show up to work every day, most days, and then things slow down. So you can support this program by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. Also, folks, you got to hustle. I am not kidding now. Tickets are, we've just been back for 2 days since Thanksgiving break, and tickets are selling like hotcakes to the Brooklyn PODFEST live Majority Report show on January 13th at 2:30 p.m., 18 and over. The whole gang's going to be here, and we're debating. I'm debating about a guest or who it should be or what kind of guest. So we'll see about that. But nevertheless, we'll be there with bells on, and that's like
bells on.
Do you say in the festive season?
Okay,
so go to majority.fm.
You really are stoked about.
I'm doing the
Alex
Jones face.
You can pick it.
What? Okay.
Anyway,
great. Here's that.
Matt,
do we have that clip? Great. Here's that clip.
You can head to majority.fm to buy your tickets, or just the show is going to be at the Bell House in Brooklyn, and it's a decent sized venue, but we're getting close to there not being any tickets.
It won't be the first time we sell that baby out.
It's true. It would be the second time.
Yeah, but this time stay for the following act.
That's right.
That was awkward.
I think they're doing it different this time.
Okay,
that
good.
was a different festival. That was the New York PODFest. This is the Brooklyn PODFest.
Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah.
What a diverse marketplace.
Exactly. We're almost like 1.4 miles away from that place.
Right.
So check it out. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Jamie brought us back some Zapatista coffee. That is where Just Coffee started. That fair trade. That's why they've got that same star on their thing. And
it's pretty cool.
I'm drinking a little bit right now. It's good.
Thanks, Jamie.
It smelled good.
It smelled
You're
great.
welcome. I bought it right from the Zapatistas.
There you go. Now you can't all do that, but you can go to justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Today is Wednesday. It is Mike Cernovich Day, and which means that yesterday, when Mike Cernovich Day falls on a Wednesday, that means the day before it was a Tuesday. And that means
I was reminiscing with the bit that we did on TMBS the week after it all just went really badly for Mike was a Mandela radio show where he was just like, we don't know weird Mike. He's weird.
He got overextended.
Yeah, weird Mike. I mean, he's weird. Professor Richard Wolff was on yesterday. We had an incredible time.
In studio.
In studio, Corbyn, Brexit. I mean, really just a masterclass in both the main and post game.
You can watch Griscom deliver his economic minute as Wolf sort of lounges in the background.
Wolf lounges in the couch, staring over his shoulder.
Was there a battle?
It was actually
of wits.
It was definitely a battle of wits, and we played the Goodfellas clip for Wolf as well. The beginning focusing on Northern Ireland and South Africa and Brexit, and also tickets are moving fast, like a empty potato bag for the February 1st live show also at the Bell House, not part of Brooklyn Podfest, just TMBS. Get your tickets for that too, and patreon.com/TMBS for everything.
We should get some, maybe some like swag that if you go to both shows, like somehow you get a tick. Like we should work out something like that. Like you get like a coupon, and if you match it, that's like torn. And if you match it at the second show, you get like together, right? Jamie, what's happening on the Antifada?
Oh, who knows, man. I've.
All right.
I just got back from Mexico. I'm still so tired. No, there are things happening.
You guys got to take a nap. I don't know what's going on at that house.
We're doing our best. We had a chill night last night, but anyway,
tough stuff.
We still have our episode out on the history of the IWW that Sean did with Jake and Alex from Pod Damn America. That is a crossover episode, folks. This weekend, we are having on a Marxist professor of our own named Paul Maddock Jr. to destroy neoclassical economics with facts and logic. So that should be interesting for anyone who wants to know more about Marxist economics, aka the kind that actually make sense. And then the following week, a little preview for you. We're definitely going to put together an episode on the Zapatista uprising in Mexico.
All right. And Matt?
Literary Hangover. It's my podcast. It's available where podcasts are. And the most recent episode will be uploaded for the people who like to watch it on YouTube shortly.
No, forget it. Fine.
What?
No, I was just going to say that now all of the TMBSs are on our YouTube channel, just so people, in case they're looking for it.
Oh, the live show.
The live show, yeah.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920. The IM machine is on. We will call into the show and see you in the fun half. Don't get better than that, ladies and gentlemen. That is like a birthday La Poupée for me.
Speaking of which,
that is like
Emmanuel Macron is trash, and we hate him. I just want to take that opportunity.
That singer was German, actually. So do you have anything?
That song was German?
Yeah. Well, that was
excuse me, it has nothing to do
that
with
was Sandy Wolfram. The album title was Sennungsfangzig.
Oh, then I'm not thrilled with Angela
that was
Merkel.
totally
Merkel, not much better.
Angela Merkel, not much better. But actually, I would say better. Like, not much better, but Macron is really in his own class of trash.
Yeah.
Calling from a 617 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, can you hear me?
Barely. Who's this?
Hey, this is Micah from Seattle.
Micah from Seattle. What's on your mind?
Hey, I just want to talk about environmental sort of issues. You know, this election recently. I believe there was a change in policy about asbestos. There's now more use of asbestos in the environment. And I was sort of curious. Like, why do you think some of these environmental issues are not like a bigger political cudgel, to talk about all the people that are going to die from more crap in the environment?
When the Trump administration's EPA rolled back those asbestos rules, I mean, we mentioned it. Why do I think it doesn't come up? I think there's just so much that is there that it's like drinking from a fire hose. I will say this, that you did see, if you could pick out 2 or 3 cabinet secretaries who have been the recipient of the most ire from the Democrats within Congress, I would say that I would put DeVos up there, and then I would say EPA had was getting most of the fire. So, but yeah, these small rules. I mean, look, I went through this with the Bush administration, like the Clean Skies Initiative, where it basically ordered states to allow for more mercury emissions than they were allowing at the time. So I think when you got what's happening with climate change, it's tough to sort of like rally people around asbestos. That's the only answer I have. I mean, I don't have a satisfactory answer for you. I mean, to me, I find it outrageous. But I think it's just it is. I think it just ends up being. I think if people don't feel it as materially as they do, let's say, healthcare, which is why you saw healthcare as a primary issue in the midterms.
I would only add that there are major generational differences in how much people care about climate change. Like, if you poll, they've done polls of like millennials and even younger people who say that it's like pretty much at the top of their list in terms of what they're concerned about in terms of policy, and they care a whole lot more than older people do, which makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, you just hear all this demagoguery, about that caravan, abortion, on the right, and it's just kind of interesting why there's not more pushback against hey, people are literally going to die, kids are going to die.
I think the number
like
of asbestos.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of asbestos, I think the number was something like what? Brendan, do you remember what that number was? It was like something like 16,000 or 30,000 people were going to die because of that asbestos rollback. I mean, we've seen. I had these numbers. I think in the context of the Charlie Kirk debate. I remember looking these up, and it's
wrong.
It's pretty bad.
Wrong. That's
What's
wrong.
it? 40,000 on asbestos. I mean. And it's just basically, it is the perfect giveaway to corporations. Like, we're going to allow you to profit more, and the cost is going to be absorbed by just citizens who are going to pay for, in the form of their deaths or in terms of, their diminishing health as it goes. It is completely just offloading these externalities onto other people. But I'm sorry, what was your name again?
Micah?
Micah, I appreciate the call. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Take care.
Bye. Calling from a 315 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, it's Chris from Syracuse.
Chris from Syracuse. What's on your mind?
Well, I just turned 50, so the oncoming hand of death is on my mind, that's for sure.
Hey, buddy, take it easy, will you? There's some people around here who might be just slightly older than you.
Well, it's a good thing I found a new bourbon.
Oh.
And it's from New York, too, so you don't even have to, support Mitch McConnell.
Oh, what would that be, by any chance?
It's called Beanball. It's from Cooperstown.
Beanball. All right.
It's very good.
All right. I will check that out.
Give it a try.
I will. So what else? What's on
So
your
listen,
mind?
Well, at the risk of picking the scab of the zero-sum debate, I came across some research that said that almost half of Americans would rather make $35,000 a year if the median income was $25,000 than make $50,000 if the median was $100,000. So it just goes to show that, class status is a lot more than about, just the raw number of how much people make. It's about their relative status in society.
Well, it's tough, though, with numbers like that, because if the median income is lower than what you're making, things are going to be a little bit more, are going to be more accessible to you. Do you know what I mean? I mean, if New York City, if the average, for people, I guess, I don't know what the average is in Manhattan, let's say, but I would imagine it's significantly higher than it is in the other boroughs. And if it wasn't, I have a feeling real estate would be a little bit cheap. Maybe Manhattan may be but in any type of region, if you're making more than the median, your buying power is that much better, as opposed to making less than the median, where even if in real dollars it may be more, or I should say in relative dollars. You follow what I'm saying? So it's hard to know if that's it's hard to know. But I know what you're talking about. There's like there's a classic personality test where it's like, if you are working at a place and the person next to you, they're doing the same job, you have a choice. You both make $50,000, or they make 70 and you make 60. Which option do you prefer? And more people than you would imagine will say, I want to make what that other person's making, as opposed to making more than I'm making, more in the other scenario, as long as, the other person isn't making more. I mean, so I know what you're saying. I just don't know if what you're talking about really is assesses that quality. But I tend to agree with you.
Well, I totally believe that stat, and I totally believe that Americans, I'm assuming that's who was surveyed, have that desire. The only thing that I would caution against is taking that as a poll of human nature, because we live in such an intensely competitive and hierarchical society. It would be weird if people were not like that.
I think people need to really
I totally agree with that. And I think we need to think about sort of the Gramscian idea. As a Marxist myself, I think we need to talk about kind of the hegemony of capitalism and where social status fits into that. So I might suggest you guys take a look at Christian Chun's work. He's at UMass. He wrote a book called Discourses of Everyday Capitalism, where he looked at what, just everyday people think about how capitalism works for them.
Oh, that sounds like a
really interesting book.
Brendan, will you put that down on the list?
Sounds like a guest.
And check out, and just I just think in general, the concept of overdetermination is great.
Appreciate the call,
really
Chris.
Just getting comfortable with multiple variables interacting with each other in ways that aren't linear and hard to figure out.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Bye.
Man, I want to go back to Oventique.
Call from a 509 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 509.
This is Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan. How are you, sir?
Good. Hey, I'm out on climate change. I don't believe that shit anymore.
Oh, you're done. You're done believing it. Why is that?
I'm out. Yeah. Makes me uncomfortable. And I just, I don't know those people who wrote that stuff. I don't know. Do you remember Pluto?
Do I remember Pluto? Yeah, the planet or the
That's a good point.
Yeah, dude.
The
cartoon
Disney,
dog?
the
Not
Disney.
a planet anymore.
Right.
You don't even know. You don't even know what it's called.
How do you explain that?
Because it used to be a planet, and now it's just a rock.
It exists.
So-
It's a yes. Actually,
Used to be called
Saul
global
and I have
warming.
had this conversation.
Case closed. In fact, asbestos used to be fucking good for you, and now it's bad for you.
I'm not sure
You know,
that
when I grew
asbestos
up, you
was
could
ever good for you. I'm quite sure it was
Well,
just
when
maybe
I
at
grew
best
up,
neutral.
When I grew up, you could eat lead paint, and it was like no big deal. And now scientists are like, don't do that.
No,
you know? So
I don't
it's like,
think that's
they don't
true.
Know.
Actually, when you grew up, unless you're, my understanding is that you're younger than I, and I believe that when you grew up, it was well known at that point that lead was problematic.
Well, I'm from the West Coast.
Oh, all
Things
right.
take a
Sorry,
time
I didn't realize.
Pony
that.
Express.
There you go.
Anyways, it's just like it
How does lead
doesn't
taste?
feel good to believe that life ends for me, and I don't like thinking about climate change. So I just, I'm all in on it not being real, and I'm telling you, it feels fucking great.
Well, I will take that to heart. Thank you, Ronald Reagan. I appreciate that.
It's good mental health advice.
Yeah, that's good. That's good self-care you're doing.
Thanks, man. Can I make one quick, super quick point, real quick?
Sure.
Real quick. So I called the other day and I mentioned that the sort of acceptance of climate change reminds me of when people were like, okay, gay people were born that way.
Right.
And you said something like, yeah, I'm not sure how that shift happened. And I'll just tell you from my own personal experience and from the people I know, the reason that shift happened 100% was due to the courage of people coming out of the closet and people like me who were sort of indoctrinated and homophobic having to confront really dumb, antiquated views with real people in our lives and tragic stories of people being, losing their families or taking their own lives in some cases, sadly. And I think they're just hit a critical mass when people could no longer live in that kind of bubble because they were surrounded by people who were really nice and good people and also were gay openly. And,
I have two thoughts.
I
I have
think
two thoughts
in
about
some
that.
ways.
I have two thoughts about that. One is I think part of the reason why that happened, was activists and even like TV shows, right? Like where you could have actually openly gay TV characters, and that gave a lot of courage to people who weren't necessarily in communities where there was a lot of openly gay people. But it's funny that you make that point because yesterday I recorded an interview with Michael Mann, who is one of the premier climate scientists, at least in popular culture. And his point was he thinks that people are going to and have become more sensitive to climate change, sadly, because they're getting more firsthand experience of it. California, he says, used to have a fire season, and he says California is now a fire season. Used to be in winter, you wouldn't get these massive wildfires, and now you still are, or now you are, I should say. And he says the only thing that's problematic with that is that stuff is a lagging indicator. In other words, you can't reverse not only can you not reverse where we're at today, you can't reverse where we're going to be a year or two from now, even if you start today. Like, so you know, that's inevitable. The momentum is such.
Who told you that? Who told you that? Some scientist that used to
That's what I was
going to
say.
Pluto,
I mean, Michael
planet?
Mann, you imagine how loaded that guy is?
Right.
It's like the premier climate scientist.
Gets in his
like
Bentley.
I don't know about that
I
whole
know.
second.
He's probably
I don't know about
raking
that
in the
whole
dough.
second.
Oh,
point
yeah,
you
yeah,
made.
totally.
Rolling in the scam.
I heard he has a Bugatti.
Yeah, he does. He's like jetting on the Pacific coast in a Bugatti. He's on a speakerphone. He's like, oh yeah, this is forest fires happen all the time now.
Oh, he
so
hung up.
Awesome.
A lot of people don't
He's
know the
driving like 150 miles.
He
an
hung
hour.
up on us.
The Big Pimpin' music video was actually on his climate scientist's yacht.
Yeah, it was on a climate scientist. Like, I had a friend who's a climate scientist. You know how loaded they are. They was like, we could make the video.
One of those flat Earth YouTube videos that I watched, they superimposed just dollar bills, making it rain all over Neil deGrasse Tyson when he's talking about how the Earth is round.
He actually,
Neil deGrasse Tyson
You know,
is
I've been saying-
overcompensating.
but he takes the train.
Yeah,
he takes the
Coke
subway.
money. He takes Coke money, right?
Well, I mean,
because they fund.
If you work in a
the Museum of
museum, you
Natural
take Coke
History.
money,
right?
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
so
I've been
incredible.
talking about the Earth being round for years, and no one has given me a single dollar for it.
Yeah, me neither.
Now, I will say this. One of the things that we were talking about with Man, and this is on Ring of Fire Radio, folks. You can go and head over to rofpodcast.com and check it out. I don't know what's going to be on the free version or the paid version this week, but check it out. I asked him specifically, like, what about this claim that these scientists who make this report are making money? And he goes, they literally are all doing it volunteer. Like,
yeah,
it's like not, it's on
consulting
top
contracts.
of
Like sometimes you do a free thing, and then that opens business opportunities. So it's probably on the other end is where they're making all their money.
Right, that's probably
you know what I mean. That's how it works. Stop being
Government
so naive.
agency.
Sam, you're a man of the world.
They're all
you write a free UN
incidentally,
report.
They're all rich kids.
Incidentally,
You're like, you have time
Working
to
for the
explore your
government.
passion, and then you can do what you do is you start with a free internship, writing a UN report. and then you see-
just to tell Ronald Reagan, JB IMs, Pluto is called a trans-Neptunian object. It's mostly ice, not rock.
Oh God, boo.
Good day, sir.
Yeah, no, I agree. Fuck Pluto.
I would just like to say, somebody took seriously what I said the other day that scientists shouldn't be allowed to run for public office. So I'd like to clarify that they should not be allowed to run for public office.
Yeah, that wasn't a joke.
No, that wasn't a joke. It was completely sincere.
There's stories about that are, there was a great story in Al Jazeera about the U.S. government's policy now of creating this border crisis by essentially preventing people from coming into the border. I mean, you can only apply for asylum when you're in the United States. And U.S. law has said, how you get in is how you get in, but as long as you attempt to apply, then you get into the system. So they are basically keeping people from outside, and they're preventing them from crossing the border to apply for asylum. This is creating this crisis situation on the border, and I mentioned that. We've been talking about this for the past couple of days about all the different ways that the right wing has been prevaricating about this. Like, there's actually more men than women and children in the caravan. True, as if that means that there's no women and children, and which is decidedly untrue. Maybe it's a 30-70, maybe it's a 40-60 split, maybe it's 20-80, but you're still tear gassing or pepper spraying women and children.
And then men who women and children may be depending on, but
and
aren't
then number
there.
2 is like, it's not such a great thing just to pepper spray men. I mean, like, I don't understand like why all of a sudden, like, oh yeah, you can pepper spray men. But here is Geraldo Rivera on Fox News, knowing that his job is to be the stick in the mud. Very rare occasions, but very rarely he does it. And here he is with the odious and equally moronic Jesse Waters, interrupting this Jesse Waters moment to deliver a what I think is a pretty impressive, heartfelt plea for some shred of decency and humanity from these people.
The president will be speaking at a rally in Mississippi this hour, and we're going to be monitoring it, and we'll bring you the latest. All right, so Geraldo, on the tear gas situation, everybody is showing in the mainstream media this one image of the mom and the young girl fleeing. But what they're not showing is that they're surrounded by almost all men who had been, violently attacking and throwing things and taunting the Border Patrol. Do you think that's honest what the media is doing or dishonest?
I refuse to deal with this as a media issue because it's far too important. With all due respect, Jesse, this is something that goes to the very quick. This goes to my soul.
Right, but that's how the audience is consuming
fulfilling my role as the designated piñata on Fox News. I want to say
That's racist.
I am ashamed. This tear gas choked me. We treat these people, these economic refugees, as if they're zombies from The Walking Dead. I think we arrested 42 people. 8 of them were women with children. We have to deal with this problem humanely and with compassion. These are not invaders. Stop using these military analogies. This is absolutely painful to watch. We are a nation of immigrants. These are desperate people. They walk 2,000 miles. Why? Because they want to rape your daughter or steal your lunch? No, because they want a job. They want to fill the millions of unfilled jobs we have in the agricultural sector. They want to wash dishes in the restaurants. They want to deliver the pizzas. For goodness sake, I can't. We suspend our humanity when it comes to this issue, and I fear that it is because they look different than the man.
Geraldo, can I respond? Because I understand what Geraldo is saying, but you cannot demean people for looking at this and seeing this as a violation of a process.
Oh, no, you don't know what the process is. The violation of the process is actually on behalf of the Trump administration, which is not allowing these people to come in, apply for asylum, have their asylum claims or petitions adjudicated, and then either be granted asylum or rejected for asylum and told to go home. Now, if it was up to me, I would have a far more lenient process, one that wasn't so requiring such a high bar in terms of asylum. But that's the process. So this is, Gutfield's position is a retreat to attempt, in the light of being shamed for having no humanity, to make it about process. And he's lying here, too, because he's got no answer for that as well.
They do this move where it says you can't blame people for looking at this and seeing what they're seeing, like broken process or like rocks being thrown, right? But they're creating the impression that people
they're the ones who are mediating what's going on down there.
You can't blame them for believing our lies and propaganda.
Exactly.
Geraldo.
Exactly.
You can't blame them having
Geraldo,
incredible...
if they're watching the 5, they're watching the rest of the tripe on this network. And every day
Geraldo, they've been watching us lie about it and give them anxiety attacks.
Exactly.
In fact, we should be held legally accountable for premature aging and heart attacks of isolated old people watching this garbage all day.
And that's why you could look at the ads that they offer, and then it all comes together.
And speaking about the economic nationalism in some of these arguments they're making, I saw a stat on Twitter that which is clearly a great source, if you just gave $1 million to every person in the caravan, the government would come out ahead. And I believe it, considering how much it costs to station all those troops there.
Oh yeah. The cost that they're expending on, housing 14,000 children, let's say, or the cost that they expended on the hundreds of millions of dollars to send troops down there. And be clear, I don't think the military troops are actually even engaging in this. I don't know that they're even, they're just there as like backup.
But the military presence and brutality is the investment they're making.
Right. They think it's going to have long-term payoffs.
Yep.
Last night, Christy Hyde-Smith won the Mississippi Senate race over Mike Espy by about 10 points, a little bit, between 9 and 10 points. The delta, the normal delta, the partisan index for Mississippi's, excuse me, not the Mississippi Delta, but the.
Ooh,
I'm talking,
Brendan off mic.
Nice, he's good. The partisan index.
Correction.
But the partisan index is what I was talking about. The delta between what the partisan index is at 17 and what Espy lost by 7 points, that could be significant. And also, I should also say that there was a couple of places where in Mississippi where you got some very helpful a change because of down ballot races. There was a bunch of judicial runoffs in the circuit court, and I think all of the women who won, I got to double check that. I think there was like 3 or 4. It was the first time 3 African-American women will be circuit judges in Hinds County. I think maybe because 1 or 2 women won on November 6th. So, in losing, you can sometimes win some other things, right? You're bringing people out to the polls. But here is...
It's a Beto O'Rourke.
What's that? Yeah, exactly. Very similar dynamic. And here is, however, just so that you don't walk away thinking that Christy Hyde-Smith was an unrequited racist and she won in Mississippi, so that you don't get the wrong impression about that state, folks, or at least the 54% of people who voted for her. Here is what's this show called? Outnumbered, where there's one guy surrounded by the ladies. How crazy is that? This is nuts. When there's four guys and one woman, you know what they call that?
Irregular.
Normal. But they just can't call a show normal. They just come up with some other name. And here it is. Pete Hegseth, he's surrounded by the ladies.
It's a red state. Hyde-Smith is going to win. The polling shows that. The attempts by the media to further... Listen, you can say graceless things, foolish things. It doesn't make them racist things in every way that you have said them. I really think people that know her...
You think
she's a
talking about attempting a lynching is not a racist...
Pause it for 1 second. We're going to go back. The people who know her, these are the people who know her from that school that she went to so she didn't have to go to segregated schools? Is it those people? All the other racists she surrounded herself with say that she's perfectly nice. Here we go.
Her.
You think
she's
talking about attempting a lynching is not a racist? That doesn't have a racial connotation.
She's a nice lady with a gift for saying graceless things. First of all, I don't want to get into.
Who cares?
I don't want to get into the semantics of it, but there were.
You have to though.
Pause it. I don't want to get into the semantics. I don't want to get into the semantics.
That would be the last thing you want to get into in a conversation on language, obviously.
Right. I definitely don't want to talk about the semantics of what she said.
I'm not a linguist.
She didn't go out there and do a lynching. She said lynching. Go ahead.
Public. She did not say lynching. She said public hangings, which will refer to lawful executions at certain times in the 19th and 20th century. No, really. I'm not saying. You're playing on the field you want to play in, which is saying this lady's racist.
No,
what I'm
she's
saying is her public career shows that she isn't. And there are a lot of big issues that people vote about, and they're trying to make it about race at the last minute. This is a Republican state. She's going to win, and I don't think playing the race card wins at the polls.
Okay.
She didn't say lynching. You did.
Well, public hanging, public lynching, it has connotations, especially in the South, for the fact that African Americans were lynched. She also wore a hat with the Confederate flag on it. She went to a segregationist school, but I'm not here to call her a racist. I'm here to say that I agree with you, and I think that she is going to win this election. It's not like Doug Jones, who is running against an alleged pedophile, and even so, he only won by 1.7 points. I understand it is the Deep South, but for you to just say that this is graceless, to make a joke that is so utterly inappropriate and should have been condemned by everybody, I think is irresponsible.
You're impugning her motives and saying it was. I mean,
do you think it's funny? Is that your sense of humor?
I didn't say it was funny.
Jessica.
I didn't say it was funny.
He didn't say it was funny.
Jessica, this is exactly where my role on this network comes in right about now.
And let me just say, I'm not just doing it as an African-American person. I'm also doing it as a woman to tell you I'm getting a little hysterical.
Ironically, I would like to engage in the most primitive base form of identity.
Yes, come on now. He's not laughing. He takes this very, very seriously.
I remember
He's in charge of making it sound like a unrequited racist is not a racist, and I am too. So let's just calm down, little lady.
First of all, be fair to him. He's not very bright. And I remember when Roger Ailes told me that he liked chai chocolate mochaccino and could I run interference for racism and misogyny on the network? And I said, by golly, Roger, I can. And then I pretended I had a stomach flu, so I didn't have to follow his grotesque, obese, repulsive carcass to a hotel room in Midtown Manhattan.
Can we not get our panties in a bunch? That was actually the working title of the show, Panties in a Bunch. But
Panties unbunched.
We can't possibly have an all-ladies show, so we're going to call it Outnumbered. That's what we're going to do.
Time of the month?
Oh, God.
I'm a black woman, and I'm not as upset about this as you.
Yes, so don't forget I'm here to give everyone license.
I'm agreeing with Pete.
That sound you hear in the background is the cash register. Every time I come to the defense of one of my white colleagues, I hear one of these babies.
That goes right into the in-ear monitor.
That's right. I get.
It's a performance-based pay.
Exactly. So yesterday we talked about GM cutting 15,000 jobs in the wake of a 7-year stock buyback frenzy. This job cutting is supposedly going to save them $6 billion a year, supposedly. They, over the past 7 years, have bought back $14 billion worth of stock. They have just been on the receiving end of hundreds of millions of dollars of tax breaks annually. And they, of course, also continue to have incredibly massive CEO salaries. All this just 7-8 years shortly after the U.S. government bailed them out, saved all of the executive jobs as well as other jobs. And Fox News is starting to get a little bit worried. Here's Brian Kilmeade with Peter Moriichi. Am I saying his name right? And he is starting to worry for capitalism because it's showing a little too much flesh, I think, is probably the way to put this.
Got a huge corporate tax cut, didn't they? And wasn't the thought was that the American industry would start bringing industry home because our corporate tax rate was now competitive?
Absolutely. There's no reason why we shouldn't be selling cars in China that are made here. Now, the president has to open up the Chinese market, and, I guess that's the next stage. But abandoning the American worker, she says that Americans aren't buying sedans. Do you see Toyota getting out of the sedan business? They make money on sedans. They know how to make sedans well. The problem with Ms. Barra is she heads a company that doesn't make competitive sedans.
Wait, where's the part? Doesn't he go on to say the... Oh, here it is. Okay, sorry. I got confused. And so there is Fox News saying, maligning the company. But here's the real issue. This is on Charles Payne and Shannon Bream. Here he is. Fox News is getting a little bit concerned. Here, do we have this as clip number 4?
News broke when you were sitting here yesterday, and all we really had was the headline. I think as the day went on, the news sunk in, and this news is It's not good for these people.
It's
who
not
live in these
good.
states.
Last quarter,
Michigan, Ohio.
last quarter, the company did $35 billion in 3 months. 77% came from North American customers. 87% of operating income came from North American business. So yeah, you can build out factories all over the world, but the Americans are keeping you in business, and you kick them to the curb at the first sign of trouble.
So the president's not happy. He's shooting back at Mary
Well,
Barra.
but the president told us that the tax cuts were going to make this all magically be no problem. That GM wasn't going to outsource their thing because the taxes are coming home.
It's going to all be magically no problem.
I guess it's just doing the opposite.
We're figuring it out.
I meant the opposite.
At Mary Barra, who, by the way, happened to be at the White House yesterday for a pre-scheduled meeting with Larry Kudlow. We don't really know what was discussed there, but the president's fired back saying that they should make a better car, that he was very tough on GM's Barra over these plant closures.
I'm gonna be
so he's
tough
not
on
happy.
you. No, he shouldn't be happy, of course. I don't think any American president would be happy about this. And again, it's not like they're in dire straits. Now, they're trying to get ahead of things. They want a big fat cash flow. But this is why I think capitalism in of itself is in a lot of trouble in this country. Because, you know, these companies keep posting record earnings and they keep firing people. They keep posting record earnings and they keep buying back billions of dollars of their own stock. The American public is going to get hip to this. And my fear is that they're going to end up electing not a democratic socialist, just a straight up socialist because of these kind of shenanigans. They should have saw this coming a long time ago.
Topic number 2.
Topic number 2.
From your mouth to God's ears, honey.
You know how what Harris
Talk about walk
Faulkner
away,
does
right?
exactly right on her segments?
Talk
She
about
just did wrong.
Walk away.
I would love to see
That
Dave
is a walk
Rubin react to this clip.
Oh, well, I mean, it's interesting.
Competition's a big deal. And
Right,
so
okay.
sometimes with government, there's competition, and competition would start kicking in.
Competition.
I think what he's really saying is that when government interferes, that paves the road to socialism.
No, I think like when Dave Rubin is like struck with something like that. Well, first of all, he would be
Never would.
completely
He's not
overwhelmed
intelligent.
by
He
this
just-
guy.
he could not do that analysis.
No, he
It
couldn't
would be
do any
impossible.
of that. But he would say like, look, everybody they can do what they want. This is what a free country is about. And then he would just ask moving on to topic 2. I will say this. I think, you know, based upon the other day I was listening, last night I think it was, maybe. I don't know. I was listening to Mark Levin, who is now taken to calling Bernie Sanders a communist. Because, and I think that notion there, like we're not going to vote for a democratic socialist, we're going to vote for a socialist socialist. I think... And good for that dude for just having the wherewithal to realize, like, hey, there's a problem here. And I think, like, you'd have to be really, really oblivious not to notice it. That they're going to have to come up with another word to demonize. And I don't think communist is going to work either, frankly, because
they've been trying like SJWs, but they need something specifically economic. But that doesn't hide the
And
ball.
by the way,
enough.
this is another. This
well,
is
it's also
though,
it's just like who communists. What are you talking
Sounds
about?
old-fashioned.
It sounds, yeah, it's very
like,
old-fashioned. It's retro, and retro is cool.
It's all like it's the equivalent of like saying that Chicago politics.
But also,
like,
Well,
you-
there's still a pretty big stigma around the word communist, but less and less, I would say.
Well, there's definitely a stigma around the word communist, but the vast majority of people who react to it as if it's like saying a boogeyman are already going to vote for the right-wing candidate.
This was with 2 quick points. I mean, this was exactly what happened with de Blasio, who, by the way, is an insult to the Sandinistas. But remember when he was first running for mayor, they were like, Bill de Blasio hung out with the Sandinistas for a week in the 80s. And it was like over 90% of New Yorkers were like,
what?
You mean like he was in on a Clash recording? That's cool.
Not even
and
that.
then like
Yeah, right.
a handful of people who read the New York Post are like, he's a communist because they're already like brain dead Upper East Side lunatics who weren't going to vote for him anyways.
Right.
And then people like me were like, oh, all right. Maybe this might be worth a vote here.
Yeah, it's the same.
That's what Obama did for me when Reverend Wright came out. I was like, hey, wait a second.
Wait a second. This
gotta
guy,
take
goddamn
a second
America?
look at this dude.
Hold on.
Well, it's like the sector
Exactly.
of conservative publishing that's trying to really hard to make the anti-Semite Ilhan Omar stick.
Right.
based on just BDS support and
that's a very similar
rhetoric.
dynamic. And I also think like I would love to see an actual president would immediately nationalize the GM plants, and let's get it into the court system and see how that works out, because that's how you would save those jobs. You don't want to do this. Government's taking it over. These are public cooperatives now. Jobs stay. We make energy efficient cars. We support the economy. Screw GM. And not either fake totalitarian hectoring like Trump or like training people for the jobs of the future, or whatever the third way scam.
Yeah, it would seem that the right is a whole lot more optimistic about the chances of communism in our lifetime than the left. So maybe we should cheer up a little bit.
Well, at the very least, that would be a good clip to show, people in Schumer and Pelosi's comm staff. Like, you're so neurotic about a systemic critique of capitalism when you get asked a question from a young person on CNN. Meanwhile, Charles Payne is saying this on Fox.
Matt, Brendan, just check out the IM, because I'm looking for a couple of clips I can't seem to find. This afternoon, and we'll know by the time many of you hear this as a podcast, or we will know the outcome of the vote in the Senate to essentially stop all U.S. involvement in the war in Yemen, which is not just in terms of like the troops that we have that coordinating or selling weapons to the Saudis to continue on, providing other forms of support. Here is Bernie Sanders on the Senate floor explaining why the war in Yemen is unconstitutional. It is also inhumane, but trying to vote on against inhumane policies don't necessarily pull on the same institutionalist heartstrings within the U.S. Congress. But here is Bernie Sanders on the floor of the Senate. Was this yesterday? This morning, sorry.
Pay attention to. And that is, this war in Saudi Arabia was not authorized by the United States Congress, was not voted upon by the United States Congress, and therefore is unconstitutional. Let us not forget that the founding fathers of this country put the awesome responsibility of war and peace into the hands of the U.S. Congress.
That is
President of the United States, not a Democratic president or a Republican president. Article 1 of the Constitution clearly states that it is Congress, not the president, who has the power to declare war. Mr. President, the time is long overdue for Congress to take back that responsibility which it has abdicated under Democratic and Republican leaderships.
Okay. And here is Sanders' final call to action before yielding his time.
My friend, Senator Lee of Utah, Senator Murphy of Connecticut, and many, many others. This is an enormously important vote. This is a vote that says to the world, we are going to end the horrific humanitarian disaster that is killing tens and tens of thousands of defenseless children in Yemen. It is a war that says that we are going to stand for American values. It is a vote which says that the time is now to tell Saudi Arabia that we are not continuing to partner with them in this horrific crisis.
There you have it. We will find out the results of this vote later this afternoon. But, I mean, it's all of a part on some level when you See Trump's covering up for the Khashoggi killing. I mean,
It's exactly the same thing. It's the same continuum. And the only thing in some ways, I mean, I don't want to minimize Khashoggi at all. It's horrific and it's important, but I mean, this has been happening in Yemen for years.
Oh, yes, without a doubt. And we should say that the Obama administration opened the door to this, walked through it a little bit. They stayed probably in the front hall, as it were. The theory as expressed by former Obama officials, and you can take it for what it's worth. I think it's clear that I think the record shows that Obama did not have the best of a relationship with Saudi Arabia and was as Saudi Arabia skeptical as any of our U.S. president. But they did engage in providing support for the Saudis in Yemen, ostensibly as a way of being able to control what they were doing or to exercise some influence over it. You can believe that or not believe that. I tend to believe it and think it was a mistake.
I mean, it's
obviously,
it's both.
Well,
I mean,
yes. I mean, it's hard
because they were just also giving a gift, like, okay, we did the Iran deal. You're freaked out about it.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
Exactly. But
Murder
I think it was
Yemenis.
I think it was also a way to maintain like some small leash on it, which we have. It's just that what Trump did is he let go of the leash.
Yeah, well, they specifically narrowed the weapons they would sell them,
Right.
for sure. Can I just add real quick on the slightly related, but when MBS comes here, he was welcomed by Mark Zuckerberg and Mike Bloomberg and, of course, Trump, and obviously
Thomas Friedman
was glowing about him. Lawyers and activists in Tunisia are attempting to get a court injunction to bar him from visiting the country. So a little
nice.
shout out to them.
There you go. Good for them. You got to wonder, would MBS get so much welcoming if he wasn't so damn wealthy?
It's about his ideas.
It's about
ideas.
He's
It's
really
ideas. It's about
sweet
his
guy.
ideas.
Very
it's about
nice
his
guy.
Ideas. His money's secondary. It's ideas.
Meanwhile, we're talking about the way that we welcome refugees into this country. The number of refugees that we are now letting in, put aside for a moment what's happening at the border. The number of refugees from war-torn countries is a fraction of what we let in just 3 or 4 years ago. A fifth, a sixth, maybe a tenth. I think maybe there's a couple of thousand, several thousand Syrian refugees who will be let in, people whose homes were destroyed, whose lives were destroyed, whose cities were destroyed. So when you see what happens in this clip, it's incredibly disturbing. This is in the UK. These are British kids, I guess, just videotaping each other coming after, it seems to be in a school, and they're on a soccer pitch. And they are some British school kids, not that young, it looks like maybe high school age. And they see there's a Syrian refugee who must be in their class. It's got a broken arm. And they just do this. I mean, it's just a moment of just sort of stunning cruelty. Kids can be super cruel, but they're getting this from their parents and from society at large, right? And we should watch this to be reminded of just what this cruelty is on its most sort of basic level.
All right, Jamal, here. Come here. What?
Don't hide from the camera now. Oh no.
Say now then. Say now then. Nothing. Say now then. Nothing. Say now then. Say now then. Hey, nowhere. Fuck, say nowhere. Eh? You little bastard. Come here, you little bastard. Little bastard, I'll drown you. Oh, you want me to fucking drown you? What the fuck? You come over and snap me.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of other kids who come over to this kid's support to a certain extent, but can you just imagine, the best case for this scenario for this kid is that he didn't lose family members, but unlikely, right? And I mean, it's just horrible to watch, and it just, you know, the only thing I can tell you is just like, you know, what we're doing to people at the border, in many ways, at least metaphorically, is similar. It's just a total lack of humanity, and God knows what drives it. Just some notion of like, this guy's different, so he's necessary. I mean, the kid's obviously not a threat, right? It's just whatever problems this guy has in his head. He's going to take it out by being cruel to somebody.
Who filmed the video, too?
It seems like one of his friends.
Like the idea, if the bullies filmed the video and thought that was like a cool thing to put online, that just adds another layer of disturbingness to it.
Definitely.
Wouldn't be the first time they've.
Oh, no, they think it's
like
funny. They think it's funny. They think it's really funny. Very disturbing. Meanwhile, since we're in Britain with
now this asshole after that, the reason for that, arguably,
right, right. You know, you see a British kid beating up a Syrian refugee, and you wonder where do they get that? Where, you know, I understand the idea of teen angst and difficulty and social problems and this and that, but how do they get the notion that that's the outlet to go find a kid who's gone through God knows what kind of hell, who represents no threat to you, and just beat them up as a way of getting your frustration out? Where do they get that idea? Well, here's a suggestion. You know, I can only imagine what it's like to live in a country with a total moron, bigoted a-hole as one of your top public officials. But here is Boris Johnson.
Before meeting up with the economy minister, the foreign secretary has to do a quick bit of filming for his official Twitter feed.
Okay, yeah. Hi folks, Boris Johnson, Foreign Secretary. I'm here in Lisbon, in Portugal, to celebrate what is the oldest alliance and friendship in diplomatic history, going back to 1386, going forward through the Napoleonic Wars, through to the Second World War, when of course this was a place that was, I'm trying to think what happened in the Second World War. What did we do in the Second World War? It was neutral, wasn't it? The Azores, what did we do in the Azores?
Pause it for a second. Okay, so it's funny, but it's also what an a-hole. But all right, continue.
Hi folks, I'm Boris Johnson, I'm the Foreign Secretary. I'm here in Lisbon. Portugal is our fourth biggest trading partner.
Trading partner, we are Portugal's fourth largest. Portugal is not our fourth largest.
Okie dokie. Hi folks, Boris Johnson, I'm here in Lisbon. James Bond himself was said to have been born in Estoril. And today...
James Bond. See, he wasn't born.
Well, you can't put one thing in my brain.
No, I know. The idea for James Bond was born. The idea for James Bond was born.
Boy, I'll tell you something. He is... James Bond, incidentally, was a book character written
Born
by
in the
Ian
Azores.
Fleming.
Yeah, that's what MI6 wants you to think.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, brilliant.
It's a great friendship. It's a great partnership. It's built on shared values, and we're going to take it forward. All right? Good.
Thank you. There you go. Mic off.
The tyranny of the Twitter feed is relentless.
Yeah, there you go.
The tyranny of the massive asshole is relentless.
How did the BBC get this video?
It's, you know, they were shooting it. They were doing a documentary about him, and they probably have the politicians in Britain are probably just not as handled, and they don't set certain terms. I bet they will in the future.
Well, that's true, but I mean, also in general, I mean, actually, when we look at like really direct analogs to Trump, I mean, Berlusconi's an obvious one, but Boris Johnson's another guy that was treated like a joke and was great at doing TV hits and great at playing this like, I'm a buffoonish aristocrat. Oh boy, what did I get myself into? And he also was given this like, essentially like, tabloid pass in the British press and help build this brand where he, Mayor of London, Foreign Secretary, advocate of very far right politics.
Let's go back to the phones. Calling from a 240 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Sam, is that you?
Yes.
Hey, it's Vito from Maryland. How are you?
Hello, Vito. What's on your mind?
Hey, so I was doing some reading and I came across an article. I can't remember the publication, but it was, I guess, a political scientist from Georgetown University, and he was sort of he has his feeling is that maybe we shouldn't have as many primaries as we have, and that if we're going to have as many primaries as we do, that the delegates should be awarded proportionally as opposed to a winner-take-all way it is now, which I guess...
What do you mean, not as many primaries in states? I'm not sure I follow you.
Right, correct.
So you're talking about, in the presidential elections, we being who? Americans? Or you mean the Democrats? Or what are you talking about?
Yeah, Democrats. I'm sorry, yeah, Democrats, right.
Well, look, up until 40 years ago, 50 years ago, it was 1970, essentially, I think it was, there were no primaries. Or there was, and it was meaningless. I mean, I think, I'm not sure what problem that person's trying to solve. I mean, Democrats have won the the popular vote in 7 out of the last 6 elections on a presidential level. I mean, I think the issue isn't that the candidates have been wrong. I got to let you go, Vito, because I'm getting a lot of feedback. But I just don't know what the primary purpose. I mean, the primaries, it seems to me, are fine. I think the reforms that, in terms of the superdelegates, I've always contended that the superdelegates would go the way all the other delegates. I mean, I understand the argument that it creates a predisposition towards a certain candidate if delegates commit to them early, but that didn't work out that way in 2008. But
the superdelegate thing is just availability heuristic, right?
It's not even that. It's more just sort of like there's like a soft primary, right? It's like the money primary. But in this instance, it is, the superdelegate. And I think and people would get more concerned that it would like create an air of inevitability where there may not be any. I think the relevance of that is overestimated, but I am happy that there has been at least a reformation that has made that the case. I think in some respects, maybe I don't know exactly what they settled on. They eliminated many of the delegates, the superdelegates. I personally think that like if you're going to have superdelegates, have them. They cannot, reveal until like the convention say.
I think it also depends on the mood of the electorate, because I could see a scenario where that doesn't help you. That could backfire.
Well, it didn't. It didn't.
Oh, no, I'm saying it didn't. Yeah, no. I know it didn't work in 2008, but I'm saying even quite the opposite. Like, it really might become an advantage if they were running an insurgency to use superdelegates as a proxy for a bunch of other institutional
perhaps.
advantages.
I mean,
what power you have.
Still,
yeah. I don't think they're really that big a deal, though.
It has to create some sense of inevitability when you look at the TV and you see the numbers are so uneven before any primaries have even happened.
It's very possible, but the question is how many votes, how many minds does that change? I mean, you got to remember, you're talking about the primaries. The number of people who look on the TV to find out the primaries, it may.
I think it might affect turnout, maybe.
Well, it might.
Like if you think there's no point in voting for the candidate that you like, maybe
Except
you won't.
for in the context of Bernie's, Hillary's race, I think like turnout was probably up. I mean, there's no way to know. It's not inconceivable. And if you can keep them from declaring, I mean, personally, I think that there is a role for them, because let's say you get to March and one person is up in the delegate count.
John Edwards?
John Edwards. Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
maybe there should be a democratic process for rescinding a candidate that doesn't rely on giving that much power to elites within the party.
and what would that process be? I mean, from a practical standpoint, it's March, it's April, it's May. You're a month away from the convention.
It's a recall. We have recalls in other scenarios.
Yeah, but how would you actually literally do that? A recall will take you need a year in advance to run that election. You need the funds to run that election. You need to go state by state and set up an apparatus. There's no way to do it. And
I don't think there's no way to do it. I haven't worked out the specifics.
I mean, it's going to involve some level of delegation, probably. Though.
You're going to have to. And the question is, do you delegate it to just the DNC chair? Or do you, maybe you delegate it to the delegates that are already picked at that point, plus another complement of people, but those are people who are picked, and ostensibly, right? They would have all been theoretically John Edwards delegates. And are they going to vote against John? No, he'll get past this. Hillary Clinton's indicted. She'll get past this. I mean, there's a problem there, and there needs to be a solution, and I don't know what it is, and it needs to be a specific solution, not a general idea. There needs to be a solution. And if there's a better one than having, super delegates or uncommitted delegates, reserved for the end, I don't know what it is. And then the question is, how do you pick those super delegates? Maybe you could do it during those elections, but those elections themselves are going to end up being, you're going to get the same, it's going to fall on the same lines, right?
I mean,
and then there's also the fact that, as you would say, and clearly is coming through in this conversation, how do you square this with a blame the electorate perspective?
That's right. Very difficult. Let's go to the IMs. Lateral lisp. Sam, do you think your victory over Cernovich made you a more confident lover? What about a more confident boss? I'd like to hear your thoughts and those of the crew. Well, listen, I'm not the person to say, maybe it made me a more confident lover. No, I don't think so. I think it added some measure of confidence. I felt I learned a lot from it. Guys, am I a more confident boss since the Cernovich thing?
Yeah, I would say so.
Whatever.
I mean, there's a few different events that might correlate.
Very, 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 but noticeably slightly more pleasant to deal with.
Yeah, I don't think it's good to be a confident boss, so I would say no. I would say you have become
a more sensitive.
Yeah, you're pleasant. You've been pleasant.
A lot more pleasant.
Pleasant.
Well, no, excuse me. Nominally, slightly, in a barely discernible but yet relevant on the margins way pleasant.
So very sensitive equipment.
I don't even think Brendan's listening to the show now. He doesn't really know this.
Brendan just pops
what
in
is
with
this
geography.
one here? Is this the hockey puck? No, or is this a different one? Oh, this is the hockey puck. Okay, so good news, folks. We have cracked the code. I know there's a lot of people who send their kids to college, and they worry because of all sorts of things. And for modern parents, one of the things you worry about, my kid had a lockdown drill the other day, is the idea of a shooter coming in and killing people. Well, a lot of people say we should probably curtail the number of guns and the type of guns and the type of ammunition that people could buy. That's silly. When there is much more common sense solutions that are on the table. In fact, at Oakland University in Michigan, a lot of gun lovers out in Michigan. In fact, I've shot some skeet out there. They've come up with a new plan, and here's Fox to tell us about it.
How do you stop a bad guy with a gun? A college in Michigan says use a hockey puck.
Hockey coach for my kids when they were growing up, and I remember getting hit in the head with a hockey puck once, and it hurt.
The hockey puck fits really well into your briefcase or your backpack. It doesn't roll around when you're taking out your books.
800 pucks have been sent to Oakland University, faculty members in case of a potential active shooter. Another 1,700 will go to students.
Could we get the music as well?
What are you talking about?
I would like to have that
honestly,
music playing
the
while I'm
idea
throwing
that that's
hockey
real,
pucks
that
at a guy.
cannot be real. That cannot be real. Did we do a double check on this?
Got a good deal on some hockey
Honestly,
pucks.
I know it's on Fox, but maybe they got hoodwinked.
And they got crisis actors to say that.
Well, no, maybe.
I mean, the hoodwinking is going to be...
Fox is not be if that's not like the Yes Men or something like that. That just feels like to me it's a Yes Men.
I think it's a Michigan hockey puck manufacturer.
It is that the idea that is the response to the gun crisis. Like, you would do more to actually inhibit the chances of having a shooting event at that campus by simply like holding a protest and saying that we should have more gun control. Like that, like, talk about butterfly wings. The idea that someone's going to take the hockey puck out and throw it.
Well, they say it's very easy to carry around with you, but I got to say, if I'm preparing to save myself from a mass shooting with hockey pucks, I'm going to carry more than one.
No, because you're not ever going to be in a moment thinking, that guy's got a gun. Fortunately, in my pocket, I have a hockey puck.
You don't think you throw
I'm going
well?
to throw it at his
You don't
head.
throw well? You don't. You only need... I feel like I would only
know
need
what they
one.
say.
I was a pitcher in Little League. I
You
mean,
know
it's
what
not
they
that
say.
hard.
You should always bring a puck to a gunfight.
Exactly.
No, they say you should always
Honestly,
bring a puck to
I
a mass
feel very
shooting.
confident about my throwing arm.
That
and
looks like
I
a medieval sort of...
That does. That
No,
looks like
I
you
have this just in
spike
case we have an
somebody.
open shooter in the studio, and I'm just going to throw it at their head, and believe me, this will hurt. I mean, oh God, I think
Ow.
it can't be real.
I mean,
Well, I
but
feel more safe.
maybe we're being a bit too judgmental. Imagine if a kid pulled a gun out in a classroom and every single student threw a hockey puck at them at that moment.
All right.
So
It sounds cool.
You'd probably lose 2 or 3 kids.
Yeah.
Maybe 2 or 3. But you would probably take that guy out.
Then you can go play hockey.
Okay, I'm being informed that NPR is reporting on this as well. It's
I
not
know.
a joke.
No, I know. Brendan just said
No,
that.
I didn't hear that. I'm sorry. So that's... wow.
I can't believe that's real.
It could
Being
be
resourceful.
It could be a yes men thing. I mean,
Could be. Colin from Nebraska. Will there be sacks of potatoes in the VIP section of the Majority Live show? We do not have a VIP section at the Majority Report show. You're all VIPs, so
And
none of you are. Right. We just...
Whereas my show is a clear hierarchy.
We're a post-net neutrality show.
Yeah, my show is 2 lanes, and depending on your merit, you get to be in the better one or the worst one.
Neff, happy birthday, Sammy. Wishing you much love and schadenfreude on your special day. Yes, thank you. JJ Cool, Professor Wolf was great on TMBS last night. Of all the things he talked about, there's one thing I was blown away to hear him say. He quoted Stormy Daniels' "Game on, Tiny." Black Marxist, congratulations, Chuck Schumer. You are the only person who knows less about politics than Trump. No wall, you suck. Like when I saw that, I was like, maybe I should just run. If nobody runs against Chuck Schumer, I'm not closing the door on it. Let me just
Yeah,
put it
you
that
got
way.
a great campaign ad already.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would push that one too hard. But what happened to the Joe Rogan clip you were going to play Monday but put off till Tuesday? Did I miss it from yesterday's show, or did you forget to play it? Says Moses. In fact, we have that clip. It's a little bit long, but we have time to play this. We won't play the whole thing, but here is Joe Rogan. I think it is. This is Joe Rogan explaining why Gavin McInnes is having to leave and lamenting on it. And this is what this is what is problematic. And it's not that what Rogan says in and of itself is problematic. The problem is, like, this video, how many millions, like, it's like 1 million views, right? I mean, every video he does gets 500,000 views. And they are all, what is this on this one? How many? They are all young. I don't know if they're all young people, but they're all.
They're like Huddersville or Baraboo young boys.
Yeah, I mean, and so when Rogan, who is the source of like news and understanding and analysis for so many people, it's really dangerous to sort of say like, this whole thing was a misunderstanding. But let's listen to what he says about Gavin McInnes having to step down or not step down, and Gavin McInnes step away. And we should also just add that Gavin McInnes says there was no leaders. He was never the leader of the Proud Boys. He was just the founder. So he wasn't really stepping down. He was just disassociating himself. The Proud Boys then came out and said, we have a replacement for Gavin McInnes. It's our lawyer, who's a nut job in and of himself. Also a clear racist. But why would you replace somebody who was never your leader in the first place?
You can't really replace a founder.
Right. It's weird. But continue.
And look, it's one of those fucking things. You want to have a group, you can't control everyone in the group. So anybody in the group that does something horrible, I just sent you something. Pull this up. This is Gavin's response to all this, because so many people got mad at me that I had Gavin on in the first place. But first of all, I had Gavin on because he used to be one of the founders of Vice. Yeah. Also because I had Gavin on before that, and he was fun to hang out with. Then when I had him on
Did he become weird now?
When I had him on the last time, one of the things that he was talking about was the Proud Boys. I didn't even know what the fuck that was. I think maybe I had heard of it, but I thought it was a joke. Turned out it used to be a joke. It started off as a joke on Compound Media, and Anthony will get into it better. He knows the history of it, but they were making fun of something, and they decided to make a fake mock group called the Proud Boys. Now, the problem with this is when you have a group that's supposed to be fighting Antifa, and I actually tried to express this to him when he was on the show, because he was talking about kicking people's ass. We're going to punch them in the face. I'm telling him to punch people in the face. I'm like, okay. That's not how reality works. Like, I don't know if you've ever been punched in the face or if you've been around people that like to punch people in the face, but you don't just punch someone in the face. What happens is you punch them in the face, they come back with a bat, somebody gets a knife, people get guns. It always escalates. It's going to keep going. You don't just get away with punching people in the face. And yeah, it's not good that these Antifa people bring bike locks and smack people in the heads with them, and that's kind of the point in that in the first place. Those people don't understand what happens when you start the chain of violence. Yeah. When you start that domino chain, they don't understand what happens.
Pause it for 1 second. See, here's part of the problem, okay, is there's a fundamental misunderstanding as to what Antifa is. He is conflating some groups of people who are who either protest or may use black bloc tactics with Antifa. Gavin McInnes at one point in his Swan Song video said, the Proud Boys never go to Antifa rallies and harass them. That's because the Antifa doesn't have rallies. They are a reaction. They are definitively, definitionally, they cannot exist as, and they don't, there is no group Antifa. There are people who decide to go out and fight against fascists. And it may have started as a joke, but for whatever reason, I have a couple ideas. Gavin started carrying it into an organization that he could monetize. And all right, continue. So this notion that somehow Gavin was responding to the people who were responding to Gavin is not correct.
Not to mention, it is literally an initiation rite of the Proud Boys to beat up a leftist or a liberal.
Continue.
Think that they're living in some fucking book that they love about some revolutionary liberal character that reaches out and smashes all these oppressors of social justice. That's not reality. In reality, you just hit a guy with a lock who's talking to you. You assaulted him with a deadly weapon, and the next thing you know, they're going to kill you, or they're going to beat you, or they're going to punch you. So when a guy like Gavin says something like, you should punch them in the face, I understand why he said that, because they were inciting violence. These Antifa people would hit people with things. They're wearing masks. Some of them were doing it non-violently. Some of them just wanted what they thought was the right things to happen. But like all groups, you get a fucking big group. You can't control everybody in the group. And that happened with the Proud Boys.
No, it's not what happened with Proud Boys. Because you can go online and you can see Gavin purposely inciting violence, calling for violence. This is not
on his show.
On his show. In other shows. on Rogan's show. Yes, and you can't be responsible for every member of your group. But if you say, go commit violence, and you have initiation rites that are violent, then chances are you're going to get some violence. But continue.
Too, I think he decided to have this thing that was going to, mockingly oppose Antifa. Then it became real, and then it became violence. And this is just one of the problems that people have when there's a fucking group of people opposed to another group of people. And, him quitting the Proud Boys is definitely smart, but I don't think it's going to help because now people they're saying he's a white supremacist. And what the perception that people have of you is almost as important as what you actually do.
It's probably even more important.
Almost.
Yeah.
Because not for you and not for me, not for people that are going to actually read into it, but for people on the outside, the perception of who you are is too many things to learn. Okay, he's a racist. Oh, fuck that racist. That's all people hear. Yeah. That's all they say, and then they keep moving. Meanwhile, you got a guy who's Gavin, who, first of all, he's not even American. He's Canadian. Second of all, he's married to a Native American woman. He is not a racist. He said he's a provocateur, 100% unquestionably. He says ridiculous shit because he thinks it's funny, but he's boxed himself into a very bad situation.
As almost a troll, or like,
yes.
when I didn't even think, I know him.
Now, I mean, look, I can only tell you that I know that nearly all of Gavin's friends from a couple of years ago are no longer friends with him. I mean, it may be every single one. And it's not because they have a arm's length perspective on what he's doing. It's because they see up front what they're doing.
Oh, I thought it was because he's not funny.
It is.
He's a tryhard.
When you sit there and you say, people just look at the surface and they don't look what goes beyond it. And he's got a Native American wife, as if that all of a sudden he can't be a racist. He can't be doing anything that's racist. Or there's members of the group who are black. Or there's members of the group who are Latino. They can't be doing, definitionally, they can't be racist. No, that's not true. I mean, that's not true. You can promote anti-Semitism and have a grandchild who is a Jew. You can be racist and own slaves. You can have sex with one of your black slaves and still be racist.
I just thought a ban. Oh, I heard a fucking Jew grandkid.
Right.
No one ever told me.
I mean,
fuck.
Honestly, like this, it is more nuanced than that. And really, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what's in your heart. The perception of what you put out is a function of what you put out as a public figure. This is the thing, is like they want to judge Gavin based upon their personal relationships with him. And the bottom line is it's irrelevant. 99% of what Gavin is, and the only reason why anybody's talking about him and the only reason why he has to disassociate himself from that group is because of what he's done publicly, because of the perceptions he's created and that have caused other people to act upon. That's the only thing that's relevant here. This is not Joe Rogan at a bar talking about one of their friends. This is Joe Rogan broadcasting to literally 1 million plus people.
That's too many.
I mean, whatever. It's just that you got to take some responsibility for the
implications. Fuck you forever. That's my common quote I say. It's fuck you forever, we're done.
Fuck you forever, we're done. That's my common quote I say when David Cross stops returning my text.
We really need to make some inroads into the stoner college bro dorm room community.
Fuck you forever.
Counter
That's
this.
what I say when
nonsense.
I know, you gotta smoke more weed and watch more MMA.
Yeah, Joe Rogan is the smartest one of those guys right now. But if you became one of those guys,
that's gonna take a lot. I think it's gonna take. I'm gonna have to wait.
Have you ever done DMT and just thought about shit? It's like Social Security. They want to fucking cut it, but it's there.
All right, I get time for one more call.
It's fucking solvent.
Calling from 734 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 734. Bye-bye. All right, last call of the day. Calling from a 423. 423 area code.
Sam?
Yes, who's this?
All right. This is John from Texas.
John from
I
Texas.
heard yesterday that you,
go ahead.
you were offering some form of migrant caravan insurance. Well, I got a couple questions about that. So, when will it start? Right. So I can't get myself an insurance and then just have them jump over the border tomorrow and have it not be in place. So, wonder about that. And then also, will I be covered if like I got some weird, strange disease from Honduras land?
If you got a strange disease from Honduras, from Honduran land?
Yeah, Honduras land where they're coming from. Yeah, like Fox News told me.
Actually, we do have an addendum policy for something like that. Actually, it is probably worth it because Honduras land has some pretty exotic diseases that you could catch. But
I know Fox News told me. Also, Sam, you should probably think about whoever your background, like the waiting stuff. Like it sounds like some liberal talk show. So you should maybe call up whoever that is and make sure it's not Soros funded.
We will definitely do that. John from Texas.
Fuck you forever. That's what we say.
Appreciate the call. Thanks, buddy. All right, that's it for the phone calls. We're going to take a bunch of IMs and then get out of here. Apologize again for all the callers who have been hanging on.
It was definitely a concept.
It was a concept.
Credit for concept. Credit for concept.
At a minimum, I grew up in North Carolina. My experience, rural voters view people of color in the same light as stray cats. It's nice to bring them inside when your budget can handle it, but when times get tough, it's time to put the cat outside. In that regard, these voters think Dems are crazy cat ladies. To reach those people, you'd have to convince them their budgets can handle the aid and provide universal programs. You don't have to stop giving the aid to win them over. I mean, I think, that was one of the questions that came up with that interview with John Sides was he expressed it in that regard. People don't want to feel like somebody else is stepping in front of line for them to get what's theirs. And the question is, what if you basically say to everybody, there's no line. Everybody's just going to get it. You don't have to wait in line. You don't have to wait your turn. Everybody's turn comes at the front of the line. That's really the question, if that can be successful.
Universal programs.
Indeed. Kentucky Fried, yeah. I went to Foxwoods Casino for a show and stayed a couple of days, and I think I experienced what one potential libertarian futures would look like, just a constant siphon of money from people who might need some regulation of their vices and instead are financially exploited in literally every single way conceivable. Jez Gargelet, hasn't the work of people like Noam Chomsky over the past half a century proven the notion of good intentions to be a pernicious smokescreen for naked self-interest around power and resource control? And can't believe you accepted that guy's frame like a sack of potatoes. I mean, my point was and I think I clearly up front showed where his perspective was coming from. Broadly speaking, I think he's probably pretty accurate in terms of good intentions as far as these people are concerned. Their intentions might be molded in such a way that you and I would not perceive them as good intentions. Let's put it that way.
Well, he just doesn't. He also just has a different baseline understanding.
Well, I think the thing is, I think we explicated it. He had three things that he thought were the goal of foreign policy. Now, I may not agree with those three goals, but that's the way to assess foreign policy. I might say like, well, shouldn't one of the things be like it makes the world a better place? Just like broadly speaking, or ends a certain amount of suffering or whatnot. I mean. But I was trying to, the issue wasn't for me to argue with his base assumptions. It was to sort of make sure that those were brought out and then see where you would go from there.
But
your majority report thought your prepossessing face is ebullient today, Mr. Seder. Chris Labaco, happy birthday, you magnificent son of a bitch. Thank you. Doe, manufacturers of asbestos are looking down the barrel of a gun, multiple suits as before. They'd be idiots to continue manufacturing it. Indeed. Frankie B, hey, Sam, it's no mistake the Southern Poverty Law Center views Cernovich as a right-wing extremist. As a veteran, I'm sensitive to the vacuum that's left once you leave combat and return home, only to feel a sense of longing and loss. People like Cernovich come and take advantage of this feeling and fill it with hate and false sense of power. People like him are scum and need to be called out at every opportunity. 77 Chris, day behind the shows. I just listened to the call from North Carolina. North Carolina rednecks are a lost cause. I've lived here for 38 years. All the screams about voter fraud in the state came from Republicans started when a black guy won in 08. JB, got to that. Bearded Cripple, hey Sam, when do you think Trump will start backing Russia over Ukraine, and when do you think Putin's state visit will happen?
Don't call for a hawkish approach to what's happening in Ukraine because you don't like Trump. That could get incredibly dangerous. And I don't.
Aggressive.
Go for it. Fuck 'em.
Yeah, do it.
Aggressive. Happy birthday, Sam. In lieu of a gift, I brought a good story. My right-wing shut-in cousin was until recently hardcore into the IDW. He's obsessed with Jordan Peterson, even though he still never cleaned his room. I sent him some clips of you guys banging on Peterson. It must have worked. He is now a huge fan of Michael Brooks' show. I tried to get him to watch MR, but he said your voice was too annoying. Happy birthday, soy
great.
boy.
He's got
there
a
you
very
go.
promising future. This
Tell
guy.
him to listen to Antifada,
Tell
too.
him to harass all of his friends.
I have a mellifluous voice.
Tell him to harass all of his former friends with the new content.
Crapo Zappo. Happy birthday, Sam. Mr. Paps. Happy birthday, Sam. I ran my 50th marathon on my 50th birthday on Sunday. Was hoping to get a shofar. Good for you. Farmer Gillian. So, Sam, one of my bad habits is listening to syndicated AM radio program where a cranky lawyer verbally abuses callers. The radio station broadcasting that show played an ad for a storytelling podcast called Red Pilled America, where former Breitbart and Liberty One TV Nazi youth recently interviewed Mike Cernovich on, is the mainstream media really concerned about the safety of reporters? Kid you not. Happy birthday. I love Sarah Palin on climate change. I think it's important to mention the Republican Party is the only political party in the entire planet that's fighting for climate change. And here's the final I am of the day. Ram Saint, similar to Reagan's point on accepting homosexuality by society, similar to Ryan White putting the face on AIDS crisis in the 80s. People listened to the homophobic dogma and fear-mongering until a 10-year-old kid became publicly known, sympathetic figure, and the $4 billion bill to fund research was even written in his name. I'm not sure if the same humanization is necessarily possible for the climate crisis. Folks, thanks for all the birthday wishes. Michael will be here tomorrow. See you on Friday.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. Shifted in and out of